Welcome to this video tutorial on how to reference the Ultimate Mobile Quickbar. Because every use case is so unique, there would be no way for me to cover all of the different ideas of how to use the Quickbar for items or skills or abilities. So instead, in this video, we're going to talk about the core concept of how to reference the Ultimate Mobile Quickbar. So we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the button callback system that the Quickbar uses. And then also we're going to talk about the button info class and how you can use that to communicate with the Quickbar. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm selecting this mobile Quickbar. So I'm just going to copy this example code and we're just going to register something to this Quickbar. So inside of our example script, this is just a super simple script that has a function that debugs something. And then we have a button info variable up here, which is a Ultimate Mobile Quickbar button info. And we'll go over that a little bit later, but mainly we just want to focus on this button callback system first. So if you look at the provided information for the register to Quickbar function, it says that it registers the information to the first button that is not registered on the targeted Ultimate Mobile Quickbar. So this will just simply go to the first unregistered button, which in our case would be this button here, and it would register the information that we provide to it. So the button callback system is this your function here. So this would be whatever your function was. But if we were to just run this just like this in this example script, if we were to press play, we'd be able to see that when we click on this button down here, we get this debug. This gets called when the button is interacted with. And we can interact with all these other buttons, and this debug doesn't get called. See if I clear it there. But as soon as I click this one, that's when the debug gets called. So essentially what this is this is just whatever function you want to be called when the Quickbar button is interacted with, whichever one you register it to. So there's three different types of callbacks as well. So this main one is just a simple function. So if you have an ability like a jump ability or something else like that, you can just provide the jump function. But then if you have a little bit more in depth, a little bit more intricate item system, you might want to call one central function but then have a ID for your item, or maybe even a string key that is attached to the item itself, because you'd have a big long list of items. So you can actually have a void, let's just call it your function again, and then we could have an integer ID as a part of this function. And now what we can do here is, I think it's because it's a different name, so we actually call it your function with ID. Let's just call it that. So now let's go ahead and do debug.log, and then we're going to log your function with ID, and then we're going to provide it with the ID parameter. And then just really quickly, let's comment this out. So now we don't have just a normal function, and now we can do register to Quickbar your function with ID. We can provide this function. And now, if we go back into here, let's say that for this item, I'm just going to give it a 55 as its ID, right? So now, when we press play, we can click on this, and you can see that it called your function with ID 55. So you can see that the button callback system can allow you to either just call a function, as in your function, or we can have it call something and return an ID. And then also there is a one last one that is a string, which can be used as a key. And then this is if you were using a string dictionary or something else like that for your items or skills or whatever it would be, you can call it with this. So then it would return the provided key that you gave to the button. So now we want to talk about the button info class, because that kind of summarizes the callback system. Essentially, it's just a function that you provide to the button, and it will be called. Whatever function you provide will be called when the button is interacted with. So it's whatever function you want. Now we're going to go over the button info class. So this class is a little unique because you have it as a variable. So inside of each of your items, you would have a button info. Or if you had a skill, like if it was a jump ability or something like that, you would have a button info class. And the reason for this button info class is it allows you to communicate with the Quickbar once you've provided it. So see how we've provided when we register this to the Quickbar, we are providing it with this button information, right? So let's just say that we want to have a different icon. So let's actually make a sprite, and we're going to have this as our just item sprite, we'll say. And then in the inspector, if we let this compile, we'll see that we have not a part of the button info, because you can assign these different things to the button info if you would like. If you have it as a part of your item class and you're using this from scratch, like you've just created your item and you have this button info in there, you can feel free to use this icon variable. But if you already have an existing item class, most likely you have the sprite, or if you have an existing ability system or anything like that, you have the icon already. So let's just use an example here. We'll go into our Capsule Man example, sprites, and use some item sprites. So let's just use the cookie, for example. So now we have this item sprite assigned. So what we can do is, after we've registered to the Quickbar, what we could do is, because now this button info has been authorized control over our button that is on the Quickbar. So we can actually use this to update the icon with our item sprite. And you saw that there was a couple different functions that we can use there. But if we want to update the icon, for instance, now we can go in here, and now if we press play, remember there is no icon assigned here in the button info. So if we press play, now we can see that when it registers this information to the Quickbar, we have a cookie now. We have that, and we can still see that it's calling this function. And that's not all that the button info class can do. It's actually what you'll use to, if you're using an item or a skill that has a cooldown, you can actually update the cooldown of it. And also, for instance, like let's say that this cookie has a integer for count, and let's say that it equals 5 by default. If we want to, we can say button info dot update count. And now this is actually a really nice feature of the Quickbar, is that you can customize the Quickbar to handle both skills and items. So your skills most likely won't have an item count, like an amount of times that they can be used. But a item most likely will. So in here in these this count text options, you can see we have these little count text bases and this text, and you can go between default and count text. But now if we press play, we're going to provide it with our count, that button info. We're going to call button info.update count, and now we can see that this count is now displayed on our cookie. It even enabled those base images. So the Quickbar will take care of all of those different things depending on what you send it. And then the same thing is if we were to have a countdown. Let's, for instance, say that we have a public float for count, or maybe a cooldown time, we could say. And let's say that it's 10 seconds. What we can do here is, let's say, because we're going to need to do this inside of an update function over time, right? We can say that cooldown time minus equals time.delta time. So we're just going to remove the amount of time from this cooldown time. And after that, what we can do is we can call button info dot update cooldown. And we can provide it with our cooldown time. And then obviously we would have the max of our cooldown, which let's just say is 10 seconds. So we can provide that to the Quickbar. And now when we come here and we press play, this isn't actually how your items would work, obviously. You would want to use them first before you would see the countdown. But if we press play, you can see that we are now counting down for the cookie. And we also cannot interact with the cookie because it is in cooldown. So you see our debug is not coming up, but now that it's out of cooldown, we can call it, and that debug is called. So that kind of explains the button info. And if you have any questions about, like if you want to know what other functions are available inside of the button info or the quick bar in general, just remember that inside the README, the product README for the quick bar, you can go to documentation and you can see all of the functions that are available on the quick bar button info. So you can see we have update icon, update cooldown, update count. We can see if it exists on the quick bar, and we can actually remove this button information from the quick bar. So if we were to run out of items, we have no more cookies left, you could remove it from quick bar, all from this button info class. And then in the same way, you can check out all of the functions that are available to the quick bar itself. So hopefully that helps to know how to use the Ultimate Mobile Quick Bar in a very simple example, but you can use it for any type of item or skill or ability or anything like that. You can use this same concept. Just provide the function that you want called, and then the button info that you provide is how you will communicate with that button. So hopefully this helps.